Thank you, President Officer, and I move the motion, the amendment in my name. And welcome the opportunity to talk about tax this afternoon and thank the Tories for bringing it to the Chamber. I also thank them for the simplicity of their motion, because I think it's a chance to talk about first principles. What motivates you, what your priorities are. Isn't it interesting that the Tories always start with the money? The motion says that the Parliament believes that families and businesses in Scotland should not be taxed more than those elsewhere in the United Kingdom. But surely they'd never dream of tabling a motion that says the Parliament believes that public services in Scotland shouldn't be any better than those elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Absolutely. Because actually that's really the crux of this matter. If we want to protect our valued public services, we have to talk about how we pay for them. Who pays for them? I'm a democratic socialist. I believe in the power of government to transform people's life chances. I believe that there's nothing inevitable about poverty. I believe that we don't have to accept inequality. My vision for Scotland is one awash with universal high-quality public services that everyone invests in and everyone pays their fair share. I believe in this Parliament. It's been a feature of my whole adult life, but came to being in my formative years. I was 15 in 1997 when Labour won the general election, 16 when the referendum that created this place took place, and 17 when its doors opened. I have always believed in this place as a means to take its own decisions for Scotland in the best interests of the people of Scotland. And if you don't accept that, then you don't believe in devolution at all. Austerity is hurting Scotland, Presiding Officer, and the poorest are hurting the most. I see that across the region that I represent. A mum working 3 part-time jobs, 2 of them on 0-hour contracts, with no security about her finances from one week to the next. Her bus fares and train fares going up, but her wages have been frozen. I see the cuts to the councils in her community take away the breakfast clubs that help her get to that job or to those jobs. I see cuts to colleges that took her chance of getting on in life away from her. I see the cuts take away the care of the tenement in our stair that is diminished in the quality of our local community. The grass is overgrown. That sense of pride in the community deflated. I see our worry about the care that our mum gets when it comes to social care at home, 15-minute visits. I see our local library being closed and that one place you could take our kids for free disappearing altogether. And it doesn't have to be this way. We can choose to do things differently. If you don't mind me just making a bit more progress, we have substantial tax powers to make different choices from the Tories. It doesn't have to be this way. Now, I know we'll hear from Derek Mackay tomorrow, and he'll tell us that Scotland's budget is going down. And there's been years where he's had the ability to blame somebody else, somewhere else, for the cuts that his government have had to make. But tomorrow, the responsibility for those cuts will be his. Now, Labour has outlined why it doesn't have to be this way, why there doesn't have to be any further cuts to public services if we are bold enough to use the tax powers of this Parliament. Will the member give way? Certainly.
Patrick Harvey.
Grateful to Kezia Dugdale for giving way. Just so that I understand the intention of the Labour amendment, Kezia Dugdale knows that some of us would like to go further than 50p on the additional top rate of income tax. Is her intention to signal a direction of travel or an implacable attachment just to that one figure? Does she seek to keep with her in this amendment those who would like to go further?
Kezia Dugdale.
It's very much my intention to work with the Greens as closely as we possibly can when it comes to the issue of progressive taxes. We name 50p in our motion today because that was the platform that we put to the electorate in May and a platform that the Labour Party intends to stick to. But when we talk about progressive taxes and the member talks about progressive taxes, we are talking about asking those with the broadest shoulders to pay more tax, not tinkering around the edges that we've seen from this existing SNP government. So I say to Derek Mackay, he can choose not to follow our plan. But that is his choice. And every single cut that comes tomorrow, that trickles down to those towns and communities across Scotland, it will be an SNP cut. And that's the responsibility that he bears. Mr Briggs.
Miles Briggs.
I've listened to what the members had to say. How does she then square the fact that she supported council tax changes, which is going to see the city we represent have over £38 million taken away from it by 2021 to help fund schools which we both want to see refurbished and rebuilt? How does she square that?
Kezia Dugdale.
Well, actually, if you look at the detail of our local government taxation proposals, those people living in Band A to Band D properties will save money because of the platform that we're putting forward. We're actually advocating to help those in the poorest communities. It's something that the Tories would learn from quite substantially. In the 2 minutes that I have left, Presiding Officer, if I can just make another wider principle point about the Tories' attitude to taxation. Now, inbuilt in that motion is a suggestion that higher taxes are inherently anti-business. And I would refer Murdo Fraser to a tweet that Stephen Boyd has just put out, where he has published a table of income tax rates across countries around the world that show substantially higher income tax rates in countries with economies that are very prosperous and booming, far more so than Scotland or indeed the UK economy. So I would take that on in principle, but also in practice as well. I spend a lot of time travelling the country talking to businesses and business leaders, listening to their concerns. And it's fair to say that their priority concern is always instability. They worry about Brexit. They worry even more so about a second independence referendum. But after you get past those constitutional questions, what they tell me they worry about more is skills. They want skills and a skilled workforce for the future. And the reality is, in this city, many of the jobs that people in poor communities do will either go overseas or they will be automated. There is no future for Scotland in low-paid, low-skilled work. We have to invest in our people. The means by which we do that is to invest in education, which is why I take the Chamber Presiding Officer to our amendment, which advocates a 50p top rate of tax. And quite frankly, I don't know where the SNP sit on this. I've heard Nicola Sturgeon say she supports it in principle. I've heard her say that rather than it be radical, it's reckless. That rather than it's daring, then it's daft. I've no time left. But what she can't avoid is the fact that the SDUC remarked on how hugely disappointing it was to see a party that parades as a party of the left abandon a serious opportunity to advocate progressive taxes that would make a difference. To conclude with a simplicity, Presiding Officer, this is ultimately about fairness. I pay less as a percentage of my income in tax than I did when the Tories came into power in 2010. I pay less tax now, and I come to this chamber to seek to represent people in the poorest communities who are suffering from the cuts that his government and his party are making. So just to conclude, Presiding Officer, the way to do this is to vote for a 50p top rate of tax, and I move the amendment in my name.